In 1944, researchers locked 36 perfectly healthy young men inside a laboratory and slowly starved them. Not because they were cruel, because they wanted to understand what hunger does to the human mind. The men were volunteers, idealists mostly, conscientious objectors to World War II who chose science instead of combat. Before the experiment began, they were active, optimistic, curious. They had hobbies. They wrote in journals. They made plans for after the war. Then the starvation began. Within weeks, something strange happened. Something the researchers hadn't predicted. The men stopped caring about the war. They stopped caring about politics, philosophy, their futures, their relationships. Their entire mental world collapsed inward around one thing: food. They dreamed about food. They collected recipes obsessively. They read restaurant menus for entertainment. One man developed a compulsion to mix strange foods together in nauseating combinations just to feel in control of something edible. The psychologist running the study, Ancel Keys, called it cognitive capture. The scarce thing had taken over the mind completely. And here's what nobody talked about for decades afterward. Those men didn't just become hungry, they became worse at everything else. Their ability to concentrate collapsed. Their decision-making deteriorated. Their self-control evaporated. They described feeling like they were thinking through fog. And when the experiment ended and they were given food again, the fog lifted. Not gradually, quickly. Same men, same brains. Dramatically different cognitive performance, based on nothing but whether they had enough. That experiment was the first hint of something researchers wouldn't fully understand for another 70 years. Your brain charges you a tax. Not a metaphor, a literal cognitive tax, levied every time you don't have enough of something. Money, time, sleep, certainty. And the bill is paid in the currency that runs your life. Your ability to think clearly, make good decisions, and stay in control. What's worse, most people who are paying it right now have absolutely no idea. Let's go to a mall in New Jersey, 2012. Researchers from Harvard and Princeton are approaching strangers, regular people doing regular shopping. They ask each person to sit down for a quick IQ-style test, nothing unusual. Pattern recognition, abstract reasoning, standard cognitive assessment. But half the participants are asked a question first. Imagine your car broke down. The repair bill is $1,500. How would you handle it? That's it, just a question. Nobody's car actually broke down. Then they take the test. Here's what happened. For middle and upper income participants, the question made no difference. Their scores were the same whether they imagined the car breakdown or not. The financial scenario was hypothetical and harmless. Their minds filed it away and moved on. But for lower income participants, the ones who recognized that $1,500 repair as a real-life crisis, something different happened entirely. Their cognitive scores dropped, not by a little. The effect was equivalent to losing 13 IQ points, or going an entire night without sleep. The question hadn't changed anything in their lives. No money had left their bank accounts, no car had broken down. A single hypothetical thought about financial pressure had temporarily redirected so much of their mental processing that their ability to reason, plan, and think clearly collapsed. The lead researcher, Harvard economist Senthil Mullainathan, said something that should have made front pages around the world. For the poor, financial concerns are just below the surface. A question brings them to the top. And suddenly, cognitive resources that should be available for everything else aren't. They called it the bandwidth tax, and it was just the beginning. To understand what's actually happening inside the brain during these moments, you need to know about something psychologists call tunneling. Imagine you're walking through a long, dark tunnel. The walls are close. Your flashlight points forward. You can see what's immediately in front of you and nothing else. That's what scarcity does to the mind. When you don't have enough of something crucial, money before the end of the month, time before a deadline, certainty during a crisis, your brain narrows. It locks attention onto the threat and pulls resources away from everything else. The tunnel creates a strange paradox. On one hand, you become sharper about the thing you're focused on. people managing extremely tight budgets become extraordinarily precise calculators. They know exact prices, they remember discounts, they can make $50 stretch in ways that would humiliate someone with 10 times the money. But the tunnel is also the reason they can't see what's outside it. The payday loan with a 400% annualized interest rate, outside the tunnel. The medical appointment they keep canceling, outside the tunnel. The credit card minimum payment that's quietly destroying their future, outside the tunnel. It's not stupidity, it's not lack of discipline, it's that the tunnel physically occupies the cognitive space those decisions require. And here's the part that will make you stop and sit with it for a moment. The tunnel doesn't only open for the desperately poor, it opens for you. Every time you're stressed about money at the end of the month, every time you're overbooked and drowning in work, every time you're running on bad sleep, every time something feels genuinely uncertain and scary. The bandwidth tax is universal, it's just invisible. Now go with me to the sugarcane fields of Tamil Nadu in southern India. Mulinathan and his colleagues wanted to test whether the bandwidth tax was a real-world phenomenon, not just something that happened in labs when researchers waved hypothetical car repairs in people's faces. They found the perfect natural experiment: 464 sugarcane farmers. These farmers earn the majority of their annual income in one single harvest each year, which means every year for a few months they are generally materially rich. Then the money slowly runs out, and for the months before the next harvest they are genuinely materially poor. Same people, different financial states, at different points in the year. The researchers gave all 464 farmers identical cognitive tests twice. Once before the harvest, when money had run out, and once after, when they'd just been paid. The same farmer, the same tests, the same brain. Pre-harvest, measurably worse cognitive performance, slower processing, more reasoning errors, lower scores on tests of fluid intelligence. Post-harvest, significantly better performance across the board. Nothing had changed except their financial situation. The researchers controlled for everything they could think of: nutrition, stress, sleep patterns, workload, time of year. The cognitive difference held. It wasn't the hunger, it wasn't the physical exhaustion of harvest work, it wasn't seasonal variation, it was the money. Or rather, it was the mental weight of not having enough, the bandwidth tax running quietly in the background, consuming cognitive resources that should have been available for everything else in life. Think about what that means. Those farmers weren't making worse decisions because they had less capacity. They were making worse decisions because financial pressure was borrowing capacity from other parts of their lives, capacity they couldn't see leaving and couldn't get back until the pressure lifted. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is a poverty problem. Sad, important, but I'm watching a YouTube video, so presumably I'm not farming sugarcane before harvest. What does this have to do with me? Everything. Because the research doesn't stop at poverty. The bandwidth tax doesn't care how much money you make. It responds to the feeling of scarcity, not the fact of it. You know the feeling at the end of the month before payday, when you're watching your account balance and mentally calculating whether you can afford something that should be easy? You know the feeling when you're behind on something important and you have 17 things due and you can't think about any of them properly because you're thinking about all of them at once? That feeling. You know the feeling during a difficult period, a breakup, a job loss, a health scare, when normally simple decisions feel strangely hard and you keep doing things that feel out of character? That feeling is the tax, being collected. Researchers at Princeton found that even just anticipating financial stress, thinking about upcoming bills, rehearsing difficult conversations about money, reduced cognitive performance in ways comparable to sleep deprivation. You don't have to be broke to be cognitively burdened. You just have to be worried about money, frequently enough that the worry becomes background noise. And here's the genuinely alarming part. The people most affected by the bandwidth tax are often unaware that it's happening. Because the nature of tunneling is that you can't see what's outside the tunnel. You feel like you're thinking clearly, you're focused, you're working hard, you're making decisions, but you're making them with a fraction of the cognitive resources you'd have if the pressure weren't there. Here's a story that makes this human. Rachel was a single mother in her early 30s. She had a decent job, she wasn't destitute, but she was consistently, chronically, slightly behind. A few $100s short most months. bills that got paid late, savings that never grew. From the outside, you might have assumed poor planning, poor discipline, poor financial habits. But researchers studying people in Rachel's situation discovered something different. Rachel wasn't unable to plan. She planned meticulously, inside her tunnel. Every dollar was accounted for right in front of her. She was extraordinarily good at managing what was immediately visible. What she couldn't do, what the bandwidth tax wouldn't let her do, was think effectively about the things outside the tunnel. The importance of that savings account, the long-term cost of carrying that credit card balance, the opportunity of the night class that might lead to a better job. Not because those things weren't important to her, she would have said they were her biggest priorities, but the bandwidth tax had redirected so much of her mental processing that when she sat down to think about the future, she literally couldn't think about it clearly. Now multiply that by millions of people. Then consider that the bandwidth tax hits hardest during precisely the moments when good decisions matter most: financial stress, time pressure, uncertainty, crisis. The moments when you most need your full cognitive capacity are the exact moments when scarcity is most likely to have taken a portion of it. So, what do you do with this? First, stop misattributing what you see. When someone in financial hardship makes what looks like a bad decision, takes a high-interest loan, misses an appointment, fails to plan ahead, the instinct is to blame character, laziness, irresponsibility, a failure of will. The research says something else entirely. The decision may be bad, but the badness isn't coming from who that person is. It's coming from the cognitive conditions they're operating under, conditions created by scarcity itself. This matters because it changes everything about how we think about poverty and about ourselves in hard times. Second, start noticing when you're in the tunnel. You might not be able to stop the bandwidth tax from operating, but you can learn to recognize when it's running. And recognition is leverage. When you're stressed about money and facing a decision, about a loan, an impulse purchase, a financial shortcut, ask yourself, am I seeing clearly right now, or am I seeing only what's in front of me? The pause alone is a kind of cognitive protection. When you're slammed with work and running on no sleep and everything feels urgent, notice the tunneling. What are you not thinking about? What's outside your tunnel right now that might matter more than what's inside it? Third, and this is the one with the most research behind it, reduce the cognitive weight of financial decisions themselves. Mulainathan and his team found that one of the most powerful things you can do for someone experiencing financial scarcity isn't to give them advice, it's to reduce the complexity of their financial life. Automatic bill payments, simplified choices, fewer decisions to make under pressure. Because every decision that runs on autopilot is a decision that doesn't cost you bandwidth. Your bandwidth is limited. When scarcity steals some of it, everything runs worse. And the decisions you make during those periods for your finances, your relationships, your career, your health, carry consequences that outlast the pressure itself. That is the invisible tax. And now that you know it exists, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Here's the last thing. Ancel Keys' starving volunteers from 1944, the men who spent months obsessing over food, losing themselves inside the tunnel of hunger, when the experiment ended and they were finally fed, something interesting happened. It wasn't just that they became hungry no more. It was that they became themselves again. The curiosity came back. The idealism returned. They started thinking about the future, caring about the world, making plans, engaging with ideas beyond the next meal. Nothing about who they were had changed. The cognitive capacity was always there. It had just been borrowed, quietly, invisibly, without their knowledge, by the weight of not having enough. The bandwidth tax doesn't define your potential. It just tells you something true and uncomfortable about the conditions that either reveal it or bury it. The question is whether you can see it clearly enough to do something about it.